Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, even more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in Kansas, in Georgia, in Arkansas, Chicago, Illinois, and California, and New York, Pennsylvania, in Canada, Fiji Island, in Mexico, and Spain, and Africa, Kenya, Pakistan, Zambia, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Australia, to our brethren in Malaysia, as well as in Indonesia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. Everybody is welcome to our prophetic studies, just 1 hour exposition. This is our special episode number 4, concentrating on the subject, the 12 figurative months, which is connected to the subject, the fifth trumpet. And this is the last final warning message just prior to the close of provision. First of all, brethren, we need to understand that our God knows how to save. It says in 2TG number 6, page 21, God knows how to save. Saving is His chief concern. Or in other words, no one can teach God because God knows what He is doing. And He has already a perfect plan in the plan of redemption. I remember the statement on 2SR on page 137. It says up to 138, 2SR 137 and 138. To add anything to the religion of Christ, though it may seem good on the surface, results in a deadly sting from beneath. Our God has devised a religion sufficient to save the church if carefully followed. He needs no man's help, neither can He accept man-made devices. 2SR page 137 and 138. So, our only duty is to follow strictly the plan of God. God's plan, no final failure. It says here in track number 4 on page 42. God's plans, no final failure. Sooner or later, they will be carried out. Track number 4 on page 42. God's plans, no final failure. Sooner or later, they will be carried out. I remember the statement on 1TG number 47, page 18. It says, we should no longer be fools and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have written. Luke 24, verse 25. Believe was Jesus' motto, and it should be ours too. No doubters will enter His kingdom. In 1TG number 41, page 28, it says, what a blessed hope, what a power to save both the young and the old, and to make their names known worldwide. For such a fame as this, people would go through almost any torture known to mankind. God, though, is only asking you to believe and to comply with His word. Yes, that is all. 1TG number 41 on page 28. Now let's go back to our subject concerning the 12 figurative months in connection with the 12 months parabolic harvest period. Both of them has 3 divisions of time. In the parabolic harvest period, the first division is sowing, the second division is growing, and the third is harvest. So, the 3 divisions of the period, the 12 months parabolic harvest period. Whereas, in the 12 figurative months, the 3 divisions is the first 6 figurative months. The second division is the 5 figurative months. And the third one is leaving 1 month, leaving one parabolical 1 month to the ingathering of the great multitude. of Revelation 7, verse 9. Now, let us compare the one with the other. We already studied that the ministry of Christ is divided into two divisions. On the first advent of Jesus Christ, it is called the beginning of Christ's ministry. But on the second advent of Jesus Christ, it is called the closing of Christ's ministry, by which the focal point, both the beginning of Christ's ministry and the closing of Christ's ministry, is the fulfillment of Isaiah 61, verses 1 and 2. So let us focus now our attention to Isaiah 61, verses 1 and verse 2. So, reading again, 1SR, page 153, it says, the first verse and part of the second apply to Christ himself at the beginning of his ministry. The spirit of prophecy says it will repeat itself with the people of God. So the statement, it will repeat itself, plainly indicating that Isaiah 61, verse 1 and 2 is applied to Christ himself. But at the first advent of Jesus Christ, it is the beginning of his ministry. And the repetition must be the closing of Christ's ministry. And it says, this would find its fulfillment in the time of harvest with the 144,000. So, the statement is very plain that the repetition of such prophetic event, Isaiah 61, verse 1 and 2, will find its fulfillment in the time of harvest, which is the last and the third period in the 12 parabolic month harvest period. Now, if we will connect one symbolic code, number 3, page 4, one symbolic code, number 3, page 4. So, let us read the statement. This fact, one symbolic code, number 3, page 4. This fact is again attested by the words of Ezekiel, saying, the cherubims lifted up their wings and moved up from the earth in my sight. Ezekiel 10, verse 19. And afterwards, in chapter 11, verse 24, shows that they again returned. Let no one suppose that Christ is like prisoner in the sanctuary, and that he must stay there. But let us rather remember that his work only is there, and at his will he can come and go more conveniently than a businessman can attend his business in his office and at the same time live at home. So the paragraph is plainly telling that the work of Christ is in the sanctuary. Christ's work is in the heavenly sanctuary. And it says that the voice of inspiration is plainly telling that we should not even think that Jesus Christ is, it seems that he is a prisoner. God is a powerful God. His presence is everywhere. So we should not limit his unlimited power. So what the shepherd's rod is trying to emphasize is that only God's work. We need to focus the work of Jesus Christ in the heavenly sanctuary. That Jesus Christ can perform his work in the heavenly sanctuary, even though he will not be there, because he is a powerful God. So, what we are studying is the work of Jesus Christ in the heavenly sanctuary, as stated here in the shepherd's rod. And to repeat again, the plan of salvation, according to SR 187, saying, in the sanctuary construction and service is revealed the plan of salvation. So, the plan of salvation, of course, had been carried out by Jesus Christ in the heavenly sanctuary. So, the work of Jesus Christ is to carry out the plan of redemption, the plan of salvation. And here in one symbolic code, number 3, page 4, there are two prophetic events mentioned here, which is called the visitation of Jesus Christ on this earth. The first one is on Ezekiel chapter 1. And then in Ezekiel chapter 10, verse 19, Jesus Christ departed from earth and then returned to heaven, or returned to the heavenly sanctuary. But according to the Bible, as explained by the shepherd's rod, in Ezekiel 11, verse 24, return again to the earth, or in Ezekiel chapter 11. And that is why here in tract number 1, let us read this statement on page 39. track number 1, page 39. Following the completion of the slaughter and just preceding the scattering of the coals of fire over the city, the cherubim stood on the right side of the house, and the cloud filled the inner court. Ezekiel 10, verse 2 and 3. Later, they lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight, says the prophet, Ezekiel 10, verse 19. Then subsequently, he saw them again lift up their wings, Ezekiel 11, verse 22 and 23, showing that though they had departed after the separation took place, Ezekiel 10, verse 3 and 19, they had later returned and were now departing for the second time. Now, let us now make a close analysis of this prophetic event, brothers and sisters. The first visitation of Jesus Christ is found in Ezekiel chapter 1, right? By which that visitation, according to track number 3, let us read track number 3, page 47 and page 48. So, let us connect first our study on the vision of Ezekiel from chapter 1 up to chapter 11. The shepherd's rod already explained that from chapter 1 to chapter 11, there are 2 visitations as well as there are 2 departures. Of course, we need to focus first to the first visitation as well as to the first departure of Jesus Christ on this earth. Now, it says here in track number 3, page 47 and page 48, inescapably, therefore, the Lord's coming to His temple, Malachi 3, verse 1 to 3, His coming with all His angels, Matthew 25, and His coming enthroned above the living creatures, Ezekiel chapter 1. All 3 representing the same event, as has been shown, take place at the beginning of the judgment of the living, the time in which the judicial activities of the heavenly sanctuary extend to the earthly sanctuary, the church. Now, brothers and sisters, this event, recorded in track number 3, page 47 and page 48, cannot be applied to the day of slaughtering. The first reason is that Malachi 3, verses 1 to 3, such visitation will occur on the Day of Atonement. Now, let's read 2SR. Here in 2SR, page 100, 2SR, page 184, it says, the description by Daniel applies to the commencement of the judgment for the dead, but the one by Malachi 3, verses 1 to 3 is applicable to the judgment for the living, all of the same event, Day of Atonement, cleansing of the sanctuary. Now, brothers and sisters, the voice of inspiration plainly declared that Malachi 3, verses 1 to 3 will take place on the Day of Atonement. So that visitation of Christ on this earth will occur on the Day of Atonement, whereas the Day of Slaughter takes place on the Passover week. Now let's read White House Recruiter, page 24. It says here, with these solemn words, the Lord warns that the slaughter, the antitypical Passover. White House Recruiter on page 24. So the Day of Slaughter takes place on the antitypical Passover. And Day of Atonement cannot be Passover. There is no atonement during Passover week. And there is no Passover week on the Day of Atonement. Now, the second reason is that during that half-hour silence, Passover week, which is the Day of Slaughtering, there is no judicial proceedings. The judicial proceedings at that time had been suspended for 7 days. But the statement in track number 3, page 47 and page 48, it says, let us read again, track number 3, page 47 and page 48, all 3 representing the same event as has been shown, take place at the beginning of the judgment of the living, the time in which the judicial activities of the heavenly sanctuary extend to the earthly sanctuary, the church. Or in other words, that visitation of Jesus Christ, the judicial proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary is extended to the earthly sanctuary, indicating that there is also judicial proceedings on the earthly sanctuary. Because at that time, Jesus Christ is on the earth, indicating that the judicial proceedings is extended through the earthly sanctuary. And that is one of the most important events that we need to study closely, brothers and sisters. When the judicial proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary is extended to the earthly sanctuary. And this is the reason why this message had been proclaimed, so that each one of us could be able to prepare our lives when our cases will be investigated on this earth. So, here on trunk number 5, page 109, it says, "The investigative judgment of the dead consequently takes place in the heavenly temple only." Remember, it is the subject here is investigative judgment, not executive. The death slaughtering is executive judgment, never been called as investigative. That is already an execution. So it says here, the investigative judgment of the dead consequently takes place in the heavenly temple only, whereas the investigative judgment of the living takes place in the heavenly as well as in the earthly temple. You see, brothers and sisters, whereas the investigative judgment of the living takes place in the heavenly as well as in the earthly temple. I remember the statement here on the old symbolic code. 1 symbolic code number 13, page 10. 1 symbolic code number 13, page 10. It says, "Consequently, as the gospel," I would like to re-emphasize, the gospel is the present truth. That is why there is present truth in every generation. 1 symbolic code number 13, page 10. It says, "Consequently, as the gospel is presented to every soul, and as at that particular time his individual probation closes, his case is followed by the judgment of the living, which does the work of separation." 1 symbolic code number 13, page 10. So this statement is applied in the judgment of the living. It cannot be applied to the dead. Because when their cases were being investigated in the heavenly sanctuary, their body, according to the shepherd's rod, are no longer in existence. It says here in the General Conference Special, page 24, it says, "We know that the former," the Conference Special, page 24, it says, "We know that the former is to separate in the books above the names of the backsliders and sinners from the names of the penitent and the enduring who are among the dead. It removes only their names because their bodies are non-existent." So when the judicial proceedings takes place in the heavenly sanctuary that pertains to the dead, their bodies were no longer in existence. Now, let us study closely now, brothers and sisters, the judicial proceedings that pertains to the living. Because while our cases in the heavenly sanctuary are being investigated, we of ourselves on earth is also being investigated according to the voice of inspiration. And at that moment, when you continually, I would like to use the statement, continually reject the gospel, reject the present truth, while your case is already being investigated in the heavenly sanctuary, brothers and sisters, our probation at that moment is closed, as stated in the shepherd's rod, the one we read in 1 symbolic code, number 13, page 10. Now let's go back to our subject in connection with the book of Ezekiel. According to the shepherd's rod in track number 1, it says here, track number 1, page 12, it says, "Plainly, therefore," track number 1, page 12, "Plainly, therefore, the vision was prophetic in Ezekiel's time, and has been prophetic ever since. And if it is ever to be fulfilled, and not remain a useless and unprofitable writing, a thing which God never creates, then its mystery must of course now be unveiled, and its action executed in the near future. In the clear light of these facts, chapter 9 is seen to hold the climactic scene of the vision, describing the awful work which the Lord is to do when, with the cherubim, He visits the earth. It shows the fearsome consequences to those who reject its message. Its blessings miss, the kingdom lost. Tragic, frightful experience it shall be the fate of all who refuse now to awake and to know about it, but who choose rather to remain in ignorance of its truth and of the object of the Lord's coming in His throne." Track number 1, page 12. So, according to the voice of inspiration, the climactic scene of the vision on chapter 1 is chapter 9. That is the climactic scene on that visitation of Jesus Christ recorded on Ezekiel chapter 1. And here in tract number 3, on page 46, let us read a statement. It says, tract number 3 on page 46. It says, the angels who are round about the throne in the heavenly sanctuary during the judgment of Daniel 7 verse 9 and 10 and of Revelation 5 verse 11. It says, shall, as the parables explain, descend with the Son of Man when he comes to his temple, his church, to separate by judgment the wicked from among the just, and to purge as gold and silver those who may abide the day of his coming, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. Malachi 3 verse 2 and 3. In graphic demonstration that he will come to earth with all his angels to execute judgment upon the living, the Lord revealed himself prophetically to Ezekiel as being brought enthroned to earth by 4 living creatures just before the slaughter of the hypocrites in the church takes place. So, the shepherd's rod is very plain that this visitation of Jesus Christ takes place just before the slaughter of the hypocrites in the church takes place. Now, this is the question. When will Jesus Christ return to the heavenly sanctuary? Will Jesus Christ return to the heavenly sanctuary before the slaughtering or after the slaughtering? Without any doubts, the slaughtering mentioned there, that is the very first slaughtering which takes place before the final close of provision. Because the slaughtering has a double application. Now let us read the old symbolic code. So let's read 3 symbolic code, number 1, page 8. 3 symbolic code, number 1, page 8. It says, therefore, as there are 2 separations, there is a double fulfillment of Ezekiel's slaughter. One in the church before the close of provision, and the other in the worldly churches after the close of provision. So, that is very plain that there are 2 slaughtering. The first slaughtering is before the close of provision, but the second slaughtering is after the close of provision, according to our reading in 3 symbolic code, number 1, page 8. But the statement on tract number 3, page 46, that the fulfillment of that event, when Jesus Christ will visit the earth, it is just before the slaughter takes place in the hypocrites in the church. So I would like to repeat again. According to tract number 3, on page 46, it says, in graphic demonstration that he will come to earth with all his angels to execute judgment upon the living, the Lord revealed himself prophetically to Ezekiel as being brought enthroned to earth by 4 living creatures just before the slaughter of the hypocrites in the church takes place. Now, the slaughter mentioned there is the first slaughtering. The slaughtering that will take place before the close of provision. Because we already read, right, in 3 symbolic code, number 1, page 8, that there are 2 slaughtering. The first slaughtering is before the close of provision, and the second slaughtering is after the close of provision. Now, that visitation of Jesus Christ, which will take place on the Day of Atonement. Now, it seems, brothers and sisters, that from Christ's visitation, there are 6 months to the Day of Slaughter. The statement very plain. It says that Jesus Christ will visit the earth as the fulfillment of Malachi 3 verses 1 to 3 and Ezekiel chapter 1. Jesus Christ will visit the earth. And the shepherd's rod is very plain that such visitation is Day of Atonement. As stated on 2SR, page 184, Malachi 3 verses 1 to 3 is pointing to the Day of Atonement. So I would like to read again. 2SR, page 184. The description by Daniel applies to the commencement of the judgment for the dead. But the one by Malachi 3 verse 1 to 3 is applicable to the judgment for the living. all of the same event, Day of Atonement, cleansing of the sanctuary. So, what specific event by which Malachi 3 verse 1 to 3 will be fulfilled? Very plain, it says that is Day of Atonement. So, the visitation mentioned here in track number 3, page 46, track number 3, page 46, saying, in graphic demonstration, track number 3, page 46. In graphic demonstration that he will come to earth with all his angels to execute judgment upon the living, the Lord revealed himself prophetically to Ezekiel as being brought enthroned to earth by 4 living creatures just before the slaughter of the hypocrites in the church takes place. So, the statement just before the slaughter, when would be the slaughter? Passover week. Antitypical Passover. Now, let's read White House Recruiter, page 24. It says, with these solemn words, the Lord warns that the slaughter, the antitypical Passover. So it says, the day of slaughter is antitypical Passover. So it's easy to understand that from Christ's visitation, brothers and sisters, from the visitation of Jesus Christ to the day of slaughter, there are 6 months because the visitation of Jesus Christ is on the Day of Atonement. That is October. But the day of slaughter is on April. So that is from October to April. That is 6 months. So the statement, just before Christ visits the earth with the 4 living creatures, just before the slaughtering of the hypocrites in the church takes place, can be easily understood by saying that from the visitation of Jesus Christ to this earth, which takes place on the Day of Atonement, as stated in 2SR 184, would be 6 months just before the slaughter of the hypocrites in the church takes place, which is the day of slaughter on the antitypical Passover. Now, I would like to read answer number 5. So let's read answerer number 5, page 56. Answerer number 5 on page 56. How to prove that the slaughter is literal? Answerer number 5, page 56. How to prove that the slaughter is literal? Answer. First, call his attention to the fact that the Lord himself was at the threshold of the earthly house while the slaughter took place therein. Now, I would like to read again. It says, first, call his attention to the fact that the Lord himself was at the threshold of the earthly house while the slaughter took place therein. Carefully study track number 1, the Dardaniels of the Bible, treating of the event as seen by the prophet, and get this point along with kindred ones well fixed in the mind. Now here the shepherd's rod definitely attached Ezekiel chapter 1, the Dardaniels of the Bible, plainly indicating that at that time when the slaughtering takes place, Jesus Christ was still on the earth. He did not as yet return to the heavenly sanctuary. Now, let's go back again to the reading in track number 1 on page 39. So it says here, track number 1, page 39, it says, following the completion of the slaughter, and just preceding the scattering of the coals of fire over the city, the cherubim stood on the right side of the house, and the cloud filled the inner court. Ezekiel 10 verse 2 and 3. Later, they lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight, says the prophet. Ezekiel 10 verse 19. Then subsequently, he saw them again lift up their wings. Ezekiel 11 verse 22 to 23. Showing that though they had departed after the separation took place, when would be the departure of Jesus Christ? Recorded in Ezekiel 10 verse 3 and 19. It is after the separation took place. And we know that the separation mentioned here is the slaughtering. It says that Jesus Christ will depart from this earth after the slaughtering. It says they had later returned and were now departing for the second time. But we focus first to the first visitation and the first departure. We already proven with absolute fact, according to answerer number 5 on page 56 that during the slaughtering, the first slaughtering, Jesus Christ was still on the earth. As a matter of fact, here in 1SR, let's read 1SR on page 38. 1SR on page 38, it says, "The men with the slaughter weapons were already slaying before the man with the writer's inkhorn returned to report the matter that he had done as he was commanded." See Ezekiel 9 verse 8 and verse 11. Or what the shepherd was saying is that the slaughtering is recorded on verse 6 and 7 and even to verse 8. But the reporting of the angels in the last verse, that is on verse 11. And here the shepherd's rod is plainly telling you and I that according to the vision of Ezekiel, the men with the slaughter weapons were already slaying before the man with the writer's inkhorn returned to report the matter that he had done as he was commanded. Why is it that the men with the writer's inkhorn report the matter after the slaughtering, according to this reading? If we will connect track number 1, it says, let us read track number 1, page 38 and page 39. It says, "After the sighing and crying ones were marked, which is not to be understood as being consummated in its entirety worldwide, before the slaying follows anywhere." It says, "The slaughter completed, and the matter reported. The Lord spake unto the men clothed with linen, and said, Go in between the wheels, even under the cherub, and fill thine hand with coals of fire from between the cherubims, and scatter them over the city." The scattering of the coals of fire over the city represents absolute purification of the heart. Gospel Workers, page 23. Effected by the outpouring of the Holy Spirit upon those who received the mark, those who escaped the slaughter. Now, brothers and sisters, the statement is very plain. The slaughter completed. So after the slaughter is completed, then the matter reported. Now, this is the first report, right? Now, let us read the statement here on track number 1 on page 20 and page 21. Track number 1, page 20 and page 21. Two sealing reports. "And behold, says Ezekiel, the man clothed with linen, which had the inkhorn by his side, reported the matter while on earth." What does it mean, while on earth? While Jesus Christ was still on the earth. Because the angel with the writer inkhorn by his side, he will report to Jesus Christ. And according to this reading, he reported the matter to Jesus Christ while Jesus Christ was still on the earth. So, let's read again the statement here in track number 1, page 20 and page 21. It says, "Two sealing reports. And behold, says Ezekiel, the man clothed with linen, which had the inkhorn by his side, reported the matter while on earth, while Jesus Christ was still on earth, saying, I have done as thou hast commanded me." Ezekiel 9 verse 11. Here is the first report made at the completion of the sealing in the church, the sealing of the first fruits, the 144,000. "I saw, says the servant of the Lord, an angel with a writer's inkhorn by his side, returned from the earth, and reported to Jesus that his work was done, and the saints were numbered and sealed." Early Writings, page 279. Here is his second report, made at the completion of the sealing in the world, the sealing of the second fruits, the great multitude. Comparing both reports, each is seen to be of different event. At the first report, the Lord was on the threshold of the house on earth, Ezekiel 9 verse 3. At the second, he was in the heavenly sanctuary. So there are only two sealing reports. The first report, Jesus Christ was still on the earth. But the second report, Jesus Christ was still in the heavenly sanctuary. So different event and different location. And then it says, after the angel had made his first report, remember at the first report of the angel, Jesus Christ was still on the earth. After the angel had made his first report, the Lord commanded him. It is Jesus Christ who commanded him. "Go in between the wheels, even under the cherub, and fill thine hand with coals of fire from between the cherubims, and scatter them over the city." And he went in my sight, Ezekiel 10, verse 10. And we know that is pointing to the outpouring of the Holy Ghost. That event is pointing to the outpouring of the Holy Ghost. So, in that reading, brothers and sisters, that even at the time when the Pentecostal power had been poured out to the 144,000 living saints, Jesus Christ was still on the earth. Now, I would like to read here on track number 3, 1934 edition, on page 75. Track number 3, 1934 edition, page 75. It says, so let's read. The comparison of the two Pentecosts are perfect. The first fruits only of both being numbered, 120 in the one and 144,000 in the other. So, track number 3, 1934 edition. The comparisons of the two Pentecosts are perfect. The first fruits only of both being numbered, 120 in the one and 144,000 in the other. The innumerable company that was brought into the church after the Pentecost foreshadowed the great multitude of the final harvest, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues. Revelation 7 verse 9. The typical wave lobes, which signify the completion of the first fruit harvest, Leviticus 22 verse 17, it says, were baked with leaven to symbolize that the sins were not blotted out at the time the servants of our God were sealed. Hence, the investigative judgment for the living, blotting out the sins, will begin after the sealing of the 144,000, the spiritual wave lobes, and after the outpouring of the Spirit, the leaven may have a still deeper meaning. So the voice of inspiration is very plain that during the Pentecostal power, the outpouring of the Holy Ghost to the 144,000 living saints, at that time their sins were not yet blotted out. Why? Because Jesus Christ was still on the earth. Of course, the sins of the 144,000 cannot, and it can never be blotted out, not until Jesus Christ will return to the heavenly sanctuary. So that is statement on 2SR page 241, it says, 2SR 241, therefore, the prophecy by Enoch commenced its fulfillment in 1844, at which time the Lord came with the names and records of those who are sleeping in the grave. And when the investigation of the dead is finished, then He comes with the names of the living saints, first with the 144,000. So, that is called, brothers and sisters, the coming of Christ into the most holy place, bringing the names of the 144,000 to blot out their sins. And even in the old symbolic code, number 16, page 3, is very plain. Let's read. One symbolic code, number 16, page 3. Malachi 3 first applies as a type to the purification of the earthly temple in the days of Christ. John chapter 2 verse 14 and 15. But the direct application finds its fulfillment in the antitype, that is, in the purification of the church when it comes to His earthly temple. The church to purify the sons of Levi, the ministry, the 144,000. After this, you see, after the sons of Levi have been purified, that is the first visitation of Jesus Christ in Malachi 3 verse 1 to 3, as well as Ezekiel chapter 1, because according to track number 3, page 47, Malachi 3, 1 to 3, and Ezekiel 1 represent the same event, takes place on the Day of Atonement. And it says here, after this, He comes for the investigative judgment of the living to His heavenly temple to blot out their sins. So Jesus Christ will return to the most holy place, bringing the names of the 144,000 to blot out their sins. So let us make a short summarization, brothers and sisters, focusing first to Ezekiel chapter 1. What is the climactic event of Ezekiel chapter 1? The slaughtering on chapter 9. According to track number 1, page 12. When would be the visitation of Jesus Christ? Ezekiel chapter 1, as well as Malachi 3, verse 1 to 3, as well as Matthew 25, verse 1 to 13, according to SR 184, Day of Atonement. Day of Atonement. And the statement in track number 3, page 46, it says, that visitation of Jesus Christ takes place just before the slaughter of the hypocrites in the church takes place. When would be the day of slaughter? White House Recruiter, page 24, antitypical Passover. When would be the antitypical Passover? First month, April. Therefore, from Christ's visitation, the statement, just before the slaughter, meaning Jesus Christ visits the earth on the Day of Atonement. From that visitation of Jesus Christ, it will take 6 months. Then the slaughter, the very first slaughtering, the slaughtering just before the close of provision. But that slaughtering takes place before the angel with the writer inkhorn reported to Jesus. Why is it that the report is after the slaughtering? It's so because the man with the writer inkhorn, he himself engaged in that slaughtering. So what is the difference between the slaughtering after the close of provision and the slaughtering before the close of provision? The slaughtering before the close of provision, there are 6 men that engage in that slaughtering. And that is the reason why the angel cannot yet report to Jesus, because he himself engaged in that slaughtering. Now let us read track number 3. So it says here, track number 3, page 71. Thus, in the first section of the harvest, so this is the first section. Thus, in the first section of the harvest, the separation in the church, the wicked are destroyed by 6 men with slaughter weapons. How many men that destroy the wicked in the church, the hypocrites? 6 men. So here in Ezekiel chapter 9, so let's read Ezekiel chapter 9. It says, verse 1 and 2. He cried also in mine ears with a loud voice, saying, cause them that have charge over the city to draw near. Even every man, you see, every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth toward the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. So the 6 men, all of them have slaughter weapon, according to the vision of Ezekiel. But only one of them have the writer inkhorn. So, why is it that the man with the writer inkhorn by his side had not been able to report to Jesus Christ prior to the slaughtering? No. The shepherd's rod says it is after the slaughtering. The slaughter completed and the matter reported. Track number 138 and 39. And 1 SR page 38. It's so because on the first slaughtering, before the close of provision, the 6 men, all of them engaged in that slaughtering. So the man with the writer inkhorn, after he completely sealed the 144,000 living saints, he himself also engaged in that slaughtering. And that is why the shepherd's rod is very plain that in the first section of that slaughtering, there are 6 men. Track number 3, page 71. Thus, in the first section of the harvest, the separation in the church, the wicked are destroyed by 6 men with slaughter weapons. 6 men. Whereas the slaughtering, after the close of provision, there are only 5 men. That is why God is not the author of confusion. He has a perfect arrangement of the plan of redemption. So, brothers and sisters, to repeat again, the first slaughtering, there are 6 men engaged in that slaughtering. The man with the writer inkhorn also engaged in that slaughtering. So, after they finished slaughtering, then the man with the writer inkhorn reported to Jesus. His report is not only pertaining to the sealing of the 144,000, but as well as he also reported, because he is also among them that had been commanded by Jesus Christ that slay utterly first the hypocrites. So the statement that he reported that they completed what Jesus commanded them is both to the sealing and slaying. They had been commanded to slay first all the hypocrites in the church. Or in other statement in the shepherd's rod, all the firstborn sons. In the first slaughtering, only the firstborn sons had been destroyed. But in the second slaughtering, the last and the final slaughtering, all wicked Sabbath keepers, whether you are firstborn or not firstborn, all, without any exemption. If you fail to receive the seal of the living God, you will be a part of such destruction. And that is why it is called general destruction of all wicked Sabbath keepers throughout the whole world.
So we will continue the subject on our next episode, brothers and sisters, hoping that the good Lord will bless us and will help us. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. Have a beautiful and wonderful evening.